biggest media platform for all things eye care on the African continent. I'm your host, Obi Malopi, an optometrist based here in the motherland, South Africa. Today, we've got someone who applies his trade in something that was very dear to my heart, because when I entered the eye care industry, I did exactly what this young dynamic leader is doing, and that is other than Muhammed Joosab. How are you today, man?
Good, thanks. How are you, Obi?
I'm very well, very, very well, man. I'm excited about this interview because we're living in very uncertain economic times. And when you hear that someone is a locum optometrist and doing very well at it, there's no way you would not want to sit across this person and find out more information about what they do, how did they end up becoming a locum optometrist. But before we get into all the jazz, who are you, man, and how did you end up in eye care?
Okay, so I'm Muhammed Joosab. I'm 28 years old, and my story starts in Durban. That's where everything began. I qualified at UKZN in 2015, and I got into locums unintentionally. So I was first approached by one of my clinical supervisors regarding a locum position, and I was like, "What's a locum?" And then that's how I slowly got into it. So I slowly had more bookings from there, and eventually I just decided that I'm gonna locum for 2 years in Durban, 2 years in Joburg, and 2 years in Cape Town. So I did locums for 2 years in Durbs, and then at the end of my 2 years, I decided to relocate, and I spent 4 years in Johannesburg, which was a lot of fun. I was very young at the time, so I was looking
You're
for
still
that.
young, 28. 28 is still young. What do you mean you were still young at the time? You're still very young, man.
I was a lot younger, and I was looking for that faster pace, and just enjoying life in the city of gold. And I really, really enjoyed it. And towards the end of my 4th year of working in Johannesburg, I decided that it was time to start a new chapter in Cape Town. And that's when I relocated at the end of last year. So I'm doing locums here too. I did have an idea of taking up a permanent or a resident role in a practice when I qualified, as all, young qualified optoms do look into.
Yes.
So that was something that I did look into. And then I just realized that I enjoyed what locuming entailed. I enjoyed that I could set my own hours. I enjoyed that I could be flexible with my time, learning, different products, different systems. Working in different practices all the time was a big thing for me because I'm a very social person. I really enjoy making new connections, meeting new people. And for that, locuming was the best thing for me. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And that's what made me want to continue doing locums.
Wow. Let's unpack this whole concept about locuming. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions so that someone who's sitting in a different country or a different part of the province and is thinking to themselves, I've always wanted to actually become a locum, but there's obviously lots of challenges, lots of dynamics that are involved in becoming a locum and building a career out of it that will be sustainable. Because at the end of the day, you've got car payments, you've got bonds, you have to live. So first question would be, how easy was it to settle in a practice that can trust you as a young person who starts off in locuming? Because I could imagine that there's this typical notion that the locum is there because the main optometrist is not there. So they tend to give you the type of work that is not necessarily critical to the business, but in your case, you're doing it full time, meaning that you are somehow a permanent optometrist. You just have your own hours that you're working under. So how did you then establish yourself as a young locum optometrist in getting practices to trust you? Because you came straight out of university and now you had to learn, like you said, you have to learn the brands, learn the different equipment, learn the different techniques, learn the different practices. So how was that experience for you, and what were some of the challenges that you had to go through or overcome in the process?
So I was fortunate enough to work in the industry before I qualified. I worked as a frontliner in my 3rd and my final year. In my first
Okay.
2 years of the degree, I did other work. I worked as an English teacher. I did some TEFL on the side. Um, so I was in a completely different, frame of mind. But in my third and my final year, I thought it would be, easier for me to get into the industry if I had some background knowledge of it. So being a frontliner and working in the front of the practice in my third and my final year part-time was a really, really big experience for me because that helped me like understand the products a little bit more, understand the business aspect of optometry a little bit more. So when I went into doing locums, like my first locum ever, I was aware of the different brands and things on the market. So that was a bit easy for me. But in terms of getting other practices to learn more about me, it was more of me putting my services fully into one practice and letting
Okay.
that spread by, word of mouth and by the colleagues and, just by networking and putting myself out there in the industry. So in terms of setting myself up as a locum, it was more of me just giving 100% of my service to the one particular practice and allowing myself to open up a little bit more from there.
Wow, that is actually very, very important and powerful what you say, because I actually did the same thing. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I locumed. In actual fact, I was a travel optometrist for a particular company, and I moved around quite a lot. And after that, I realized that, wait a minute, I can actually do this outside of this particular group. And I then started locuming. And I also did a similar thing. I made sure that I'm not all over the place. I stick to one or two practices at most, and I fine-tuned my craft, my competency skills, my knowledge within this particular practice. And like you said, word of mouth goes out there, and people start wanting to work with you. I wanted to find out from you, what are some of the things that you have done to market yourself? Because I could imagine that it could be very difficult. Yes, word of mouth is still a big thing, but if you are moving from one province to another province, you technically starting afresh, unless I'm incorrect. So how did you then have to establish yourself in KZN or Durban, then move to a whole new province? Did you already have those relationships in Gauteng, or did you have to start afresh in building new friendships, new networks within the industry that can help you with your locum journey?
So when I first started off, I was very, very new to it, and I had absolutely no idea that there were ways of marketing myself. The first way that I found myself getting into the field and finding more optometrists was via a WhatsApp group. And
Okay.
so I joined that WhatsApp group specifically for KZN Optoms, where they would advertise vacancies and look for locums, because at the time it was quite difficult to find locums in KZN. And then slowly I opened up my own locum KZN group and I started administrating that WhatsApp group. From there, I found other groups on Facebook that were doing the same thing. It was also very small at the time. They weren't very vast, and there weren't lots of members because people weren't really aware of these platforms.
Okay.
And and slowly I started joining all of these platforms, like the groups on Facebook and then the WhatsApp groups. And then also there were other websites like iSight, and there were different websites where we could, list our vacancies. And so that's what I started doing. As a locum, I would advertise my dates, yeah, and which areas I'm available in on that platform. And I leave my contact number and my email address, and then I get people contacting me from there. So I think the platforms were the platforms that we used, back in the day. Like this was like 2015, 2016, around there when it was still pretty new. Um, those platforms were like a huge springboard for me, leaping into my career and taking off like that. Yeah. So it was a really, really big step for me to start those platforms. And then in order to move provinces, I had to start advertising my availability to that particular province. So I would say, I'm available from the 1st of January 2018, in East Rand, Sandton, Randburg, Midrand, on these particular dates. Please contact me if you need anything, if you need any help during this time. And in order to move to Cape Town, I was fully into this. I was immersed into the platform where now I know how things are working. I have a lot of network. I have a bigger network and have lots of, colleagues that moved over from Johannesburg to Cape Town or from Durban to Cape Town. So I had that relationship already in place. So moving to Cape Town wasn't as difficult as it was for me moving to Johannesburg. But booking in advance and things is essential. So in order to plan, you have to have an idea of what you want to market and how you want to market yourself. So that was a big thing.
Wow, that is very.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's very powerful and interesting. Yeah, you're saying, sorry to interject you there. You mentioned you are a relational type of person. You like building networks, connecting with new people and so forth, or building relationships. How, when it comes to patients then, doesn't that then become a problem for you? Because you're not necessarily always in the same practice. How big of a challenge has it been for you having to then move from one practice to another? Or are you only working with a handful of practices that enable you to then have those patient relationships where you can establish trust, loyalty, and get to a point where my patients themselves don't even know that you are the locum because of how regularly they get to see you in that particular practice? How have you navigated the challenges that come with not being able to see your patients on a regular basis?
So at first, it was a bit of a disadvantage for me as a locum, and I would communicate that with other optoms that would ask, how is it being a locum? So that would be one of the disadvantages that I picked up on, that you don't really get to follow up with the patient that you consulted with. You don't really get to get, the feedback from them regarding how their eyes have been since, you treated them. So that has been a bit of a disadvantage, but there were lots of times where I would be fortunate enough to actually receive that feedback because I would be, working within a group of practices that enabled me to get that feedback. So, for example, if I'd be working at a particular practice on a Saturday and if I was there again the following Saturday, the turnaround time for specs and in order for patients to come and collect them and things, it does take a bit of lead time. So if I was there again the following Saturday, like that would be 2 weeks after the initial consultation, and I would be fortunate enough to hear from them or see them again in the practice, it would mean a lot to me because, like I said, relationships and building that relationship and rapport with the patient is so, so big for me, especially as somebody who enjoys communicating and enjoys just building these relationships. So at first it was a bit of a disadvantage because I wouldn't get that. But as I slowly established myself and started figuring out which practices, I'd be more available for, it made it easier for me to get this feedback from patients. So it's not definite that I would see the patient again, but there would be a higher chance that I would.
Wow. Now let's flip it over then. Optometrist, optometry as a whole has evolved or is constantly evolving over time. Competency, skills, knowledge of the equipment, knowledge of products, and so forth. How do you keep abreast with what's the latest that's taking place? Because you're missing out on talking to sales reps, talking to the practices whereby these new products. How do you navigate that entire experience with regards to ensuring that you are up to date with the latest of technology, information, procedures, diagnostic approaches, and so forth? And how do you then create a niche for yourself within being a locum? Is it even possible for you to create a niche in terms of the type of services that you then render as a locum optometrist?
So in terms of learning more about the products available and the new products that are available on the market, I've actually come across quite a few reps that would be surprised to find that the resident optom wouldn't be in and I would be there. And there were times when I would go to a practice in, for example, the East Rand, I'd meet the rep, and then I'd go to a Mid Rand, and that would be like the following week, and I'd see the same rep again. So they would for me to hand over to the resident optom so that I could, just debrief them and tell them a little bit more about the product. So in a lot of cases, I was actually
Wow,
the rep
wow,
for the
wow.
product where, I would learn a little bit more, and I, I would just tell the resident optom a little bit more about it. And I just, say, if you have any questions, then you can contact me or the rep or whoever, somebody who knows a little bit more about the product.
I got you.
Yeah. But in terms of creating a niche, I found that definitely, CPD points and continuing, education helps so much. And also, I've recently undertaken the ocular therapeutics program, and I've completed it, thankfully.
Ah,
So I just need to get into my clinical hours now, and then I'm sorted out, and I can start practicing as a therapeutic optometrist.
wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So in terms of creating a niche, I find that my interest in binocular vision and ocular therapeutics can help me get to where I want to be as an optometrist in the future, to practice therapeutics and to practice BB. I find that, those are things that are sort of lacking in the market at the moment, because it's not very easy to find an optom that specializes in binocular vision. And that's been a keen interest for me from the get-go. So as a locum, I would dispense, exercises to patients, and I would leave my contact details on the card that I would give them, explaining the instructions and things of the procedure of how to conduct the therapy. And if they had any questions, then they're more than welcome to contact me or the practice, because I'm sure the resident optom will know. But like, obviously, if they just need anything else, then they're more than welcome to just let me know, so that I have some hand in their treatment.
Wow, wow. The the locuming landscape between Durban, Joburg, and Cape Town. What is the difference? What are the differences, and what are the similarities?
Okay.
And which one is your favorite? Which one is your favorite? Which one is your favorite?
That's a difficult question, but I would say Johannesburg, because I practiced longer in Johannesburg. So I feel like that is my favorite. That became home for me for a very long time, and I grew very, very deep roots in Johannesburg. So I really, really enjoyed working and living there. In terms of markets, I found that KZN was actually quite saturated with optoms, because a lot of the optoms that would graduate to UKZN would then just stick around in the province and find work in the province. In Johannesburg, it is saturated, but there is a lot of availability, and there are lots of vacancies going around Johannesburg. I think it's also because the city is turning into a mega city where they're slowly combining Pretoria and Johannesburg. So a lot of locums are willing to travel, if they're based in Sandton or if they're based in Johannesburg South, they're willing to travel to Pretoria, or they're willing to travel to Rustenburg in some cases, which is like a 2-hour commute from where they live. And it's quite a big market in Johannesburg. In Cape Town, I think it's slowly growing, but there definitely is a lot of availability, and there is a lot of space for locums to find work here. It's definitely open.
Someone is thinking to themselves, you know what? I want to be in charge of my time. I don't like the 9 to 5, working 6 or 7 days a week, working every single weekend. I want more flexibility in my schedule, in my time. I want more freedom. And they're considering going into locum work. Some of the challenges that could come would be the consistency of income. So in your case, how have you planned for like how you survive in terms of paying rent, paying bond, paying your car, having a life? How have you established the necessary disciplines that you have to then put into play in order for you to become and enjoy being a locum optometrist? Some months are obviously going to be more busier than other months. Some seasons are going to be more busier than other seasons. So how have you navigated that entire process of this month you're making X amount, next month you've got no prospects of having the same amount of locum days as you had the previous month? So do you mind unpacking for us that process, so that person that is thinking to themselves, I want to become a locum, but it looks like it's too risky. for me to do it on a permanent basis. So just unpack that for us, please.
Absolutely. It was one of my first challenges as a locum and something that I had to learn very, very quickly in order to sustain myself. So what I learned when I first started doing locums is that I would have to work a particular amount of days in order to break even. That was my first lesson. And from there, I would be more consistent with booking practices that have enjoyed working with me and that I have enjoyed working with, in terms of location, commute, products used, equipment, all sorts of things. I take all of that into consideration and I sort of build on that. And I would try and focus on booking a particular amount of days in order for me to know that I'm receiving a certain amount. And in some cases, it is difficult. Like you mentioned, some months are busier than others. Like I think every optom knows between October and March is the busiest for every practice. It's really, really Africa. So I think knowing that and having planned that accordingly in my calendar makes a very, very big difference. And booking out a particular number of days, knowing when to book and when not to book. For example, like we have Easter coming up now, we know lots of optoms are going to be looking for locums. So just trying to be available during that period. And it helps a lot during religious holidays because if you're of a particular religion and you're not celebrating, then it would, a locums feel like, hey, I can help on this day. It's possible for me to come through and it's possible for me to help you out. So I find also with the religious holidays, locums play a very, very big role. And yeah, just basically booking out a particular amount of days in order to break even and, to make a profit on top of that as well.
Wow. Are locums underpaid or overpaid?
It's so debatable.
Be honest. Be honest. Hopefully, the people that book you for locums, I don't know whether I'm saying they should be listening to what you're about to say now, or they shouldn't be listening to what you're going to be saying now. But are locums underpaid or overpaid?
I'm going to find some middle ground and I'm going to say that they paid enough. Yeah. So locums, I feel, because they have the flexibility of setting their own rate, they know how much experience they have. They know how many brands they've worked with and the lenses and products that they've dispensed or prescribed. So as a locum, there's a lot of self-accountability, when it comes to setting your rate, because it takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of brand knowledge, product knowledge, system knowledge, equipment knowledge in order to increase your rate. So there's a lot of self-accountability that comes into play when setting a locum rate. And that's why I would say, locums are paid enough because you feel that you paid what you were.
Fair. That's actually a good answer. Fair. At the end of the day, you know what you bring to the table, you know what you can contribute to the environment, and you know the value that you add. And you then base that in relation to how you're going to charge and the hours that you're going to be putting in. Because I think the ideal situation would be working less hours for double the pay of someone who's working more hours, but simply because you are bringing so much value to that particular optometric practice. So I got you on that. Now, as we come to a close, do you ever have that crave or that desire to be in full-time practice?
So actually, it's the opposite. I feel like I want to actually take a sabbatical at some point in the future and just take a break from practicing optometry. Over the past year, I did study towards a personal training certificate, which I've actually acquired now, thankfully.
Wow.
Yeah, so I hope, to use that at some point in the future. Also using my my TEFL certificate that I've received back in, just before I even started my undergrad degree. Like I had just enrolled for my undergrad and I underwent that whole process of acquiring my TEFL certificate. And I would like to use that at some point in the future, just to do a bit of traveling. I mean, I'm single right now, so I feel like I owe it to myself, just to go on that journey before I start a full-time commitment. I think at some point in the future, I would like to open up my own private practice. I just feel that I would like some stability at some point in the future, when I'm a little bit more committed, and I'm a little bit more committed to settling down in one particular place with my significant other, whoever that
Wow.
is at the time. So I think at some
No,
point I would like to, but definitely I would also like to take a sabbatical, in the near future, because moving to Cape Town was definitely my medium-term goal. And now that I've achieved that, and I've achieved my personal training certificate and my ocular therapeutics theory content and component of the course, I would like to, just take a break for a bit, but that's also something I'm figuring out.
you know what I like about your approach? You did it the other way around. You see, some other people, they go in full steam and they do optometry. And then they get to 35 and they discover that I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Whereas what you have done, you have given yourself that diversity in the different things that you have already been showing interest in, equipping yourselves with different skills sets and different knowledge, so that when you get to a stage where you feel like this is the final route that I want to take, you already have the capacity and the depth and the freedom to be able to make those decisions for yourself. So I think kudos to you for taking those risks, because it is a risk, but it will pay off, because at the end of the day, you come across as someone who's very passionate about everything that you end up doing. One of those passions, it seems like you are like you've got a side hustle. You love food. I've seen your Instagram, I've seen your Facebook. Are you a food critic or what's going on? You seem to have a bigger following with your food stuff compared to your optometry stuff. So where did the love of food come about, Mohammed?
So I've actually, yeah, so that actually started, once I moved to Johannesburg. I just found that there's so much more to life than work. And I really
Yeah.
enjoy, meeting new people. So I would start going on dates. I would start, just going out with friends and having supper at different places, and just trying out the different food around Johannesburg. And as I made trips to the Western Cape and KZN and other provinces, I thought to myself, it would be so nice just to continue this. So I started documenting that on Instagram. And and I really enjoy ice cream. So I based my whole Twitter account on having ice cream, and my Instagram on my training videos and my food adventures, my food ventures, as I'd like to call it.
Wow.
And yeah, just meeting new people along the way, tasting different food around the place. And hopefully in the future, when I do a bit of traveling, then I would like to continue that as well.
Wow, man, that is so powerful. Um, you are an exciting individual. You've got a broad perspective on how you're approaching life, and I love the fact that sometimes people would be listening to a guy like you and think this guy is all over the place. What I love about you is that there's a lot of thought process behind everything that you're doing, and you put in the necessary work that will produce the necessary results that you are desiring. So I love that about you in the fact that you put in the work to see the results that you want to see. And so you don't just do anything as by the way. So kudos to you on that. You can only be successful with that approach, because not a lot of people are like that. So parting ways now, a message that you have, firstly, to young professionals with regards, approaching their careers. What advice would you have in terms of the first 10 years of their career? What would you actually advise them to do, since you are now at the latter part of that 10-year period, if I can put it that way? And then for that person who's aspiring to become a locum, what would you recommend be some of the things that they prioritize more than anything before they even get going with being a locum?
So for young optoms, I would advise them to fall in love with optometry. Fall in love with it. Learn as much as you can. Meet as many people as you can. Have as much and gain as much knowledge as you possibly can, and use whatever you learned in campus. Because a lot of the time we find that these little clinical pearls start falling away one by one, and you feel that you want to retain that knowledge. So for young optoms, I would definitely advise fall in love with the field. It will definitely develop. That passion will be the strongest within the first, I would say, 5, maybe, yeah, 5 to 8 years, or even up to 10 years, that passion will burn as strong as it ever can. So fall in love with it, embrace it, but also remember that there is definitely more to life. And as a lecturer of mine, Dr. Moon Sami, once said,
Great man.
you should do as much as you can once you qualify. Go out, travel the world, fall in love, learn a new language. Just
Wow.
do everything that you possibly, want to do, because life is so much more than just work. And to aspiring locums, I'd advise them that look at what you want to be. So for example, if you want to be if you want to be a mom, and you're raising kids and you want to be a full-time locum, work with your hours, establish your hours, work around which areas you are comfortable working around. Set your rate. You have a weekday rate and a weekend rate. Some practices like to work with a day rate. So
Yes.
other locums, find out a little bit more, and you'll definitely find that if you want a bit more flexibility, then doing locums is the way to go.
Wow, wow, man. Hey, fantastic, fantastic. Where can people connect with you? Online, you said Twitter. What's your Twitter handle? What's your Instagram? What's your Facebook? Where can people, do you have a YouTube channel? What's going on with you? Where can people connect with you?
So I'm not yet on YouTube, but my Instagram.
This guy, that's the worst thing you have said today. You have had all these amazing pearls of wisdom, but that's the worst thing that you have said. That you don't have a YouTube channel. Unacceptable.
Not yet.
Unacceptable. But hopefully you get one soon, man.
But I just didn't update it, and I just didn't stay abreast. My Instagram and my Twitter handle are the same. It's at Muhammed Joosab, MuhammedJoosab. And my Facebook is my name and surname, just as is. So if you would like to contact or would like to get in touch or touch base, then you're more than welcome to.
Fantastic, fantastic. Everyone, that was another episode of Africa Media with Muhammed Joosab. Fantastic young man. Watch out for him. He's going to be doing amazing things over the next few years. If you're not connected yet with the Africa Media platforms, we are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, do subscribe to the Africa Media YouTube channel. We've got a fantastic content from leaders all over the continent that we showcase all the amazing work that they do on a weekly basis. So stay tuned, connect, and until the next episode, stay blessed. Take care, everyone.